Pocket design principle number 17. Don't pretend as though a problem doesn't exist, even when the problem is small. Coat of lacquer makes it shiny. This, just PVC zip ties. This will be the third video in the series. The first one dealt with truing up these flat planes. There's a lot of them for a jointer like this. The second video dealt with pressing in a new set of bearings. Spoiler alert, I used a bar clamp. In this video, I'm going to show you a little bit about what I did here, go over some of the details, and hopefully along the way give you some tips, things to look out for in case you're doing one of these. The first thing I want to discuss is fixing up these logos. There are several of them. This one is for the angle for the fence, and this tag here is for the infeed table for its depth. You can make out the text just barely if you look closely. So how I got it to this point was by carefully masking it off and just giving it a shot of red spray paint. The lettering is metallic and it's proud of the surface a little bit. We're going to use that to our advantage. And before I forget to tell you, all of these surfaces were done with linseed oil. After they were cleaned off, I wanted to use something simple that preserves that metallic look. It's all dusty right now, but underneath the dust, that's 1 or 2 coats of linseed oil. Why would I use that for a finish? Well, it's not so rugged, but what it lacks in durability, it makes up for in ease of use and its full disclosure. If a little bit of rust starts to start, I'll know it, and I can attend to it quickly.
A shot of dish soap, heavily diluted with water, will help us to keep from damaging the parts of the paint that we want to keep. I'm using a brand new piece of 800 grit sandpaper.
I shouldn't even have to tell you that if you're not in a patient mood, you should not be doing this. Just set it aside and come back later. And I should also mention that this is not my first time doing it, because the first time I had painted this before I put the linseed oil on the metal, and when I did put the linseed oil on, it ate the paint. And you only have so many tries to do this, because every time you do it, you sand off some of the metal and you reduce how proud it is. Too long didn't listen? Be patient. I wish I could say that I got it perfect, but I have a few tiny dings that I'll have to touch up. Also, pro tip, wrap your sandpaper around the corner like this. That way it won't peel up once it gets wet. Also, that allows you to dig down in. So ignore everything I said in the last video about digging. Sometimes you have to dig. Way better than it was. That is all the time I can give it. And it only looks bad under a magnifying lens. And honestly, even then, I can live with it. This can dry, and now I have to work on this and this. And while that base is out of the way, I can tell you a little bit about this setup. It's plywood on top and thin steel underneath. I cut a hole through both for this chute. I'll show you that from underneath in a moment. But these blocks of black walnut are necessary because the cranks on the infeed and outfeed tables require at least this much room. So you can't just place the jointer on a flat surface. Right now we're looking at what will be the front side. And you push this up, pull the bucket out. This is just a piece of fabric. And this here is a piece of acrylic glass that's on a hinge attached to this. The fabric goes underneath this piece of plywood and it's screwed to that. That's what holds it in place. Easy to clean, and the vibration from the thing running is enough to agitate any of the sawdust and it makes it fall down into the bucket. A pair of simple blocks keeps the bucket exactly where it's supposed to be. Now that the entire thing is a pile of clean and functional parts, the best part is putting it back together. I'll start by removing this cutter head. It's in place by 2 attachment bolts right here that go up through and attach into these bearing housings. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Probably a good thing I came back in here anyways. Look at the surface rust from all the soap water. With the cutter head out of the way, it should be easier to slide both of the tables in with it positioned over the bench like this. They fit in with a dovetail, and pay attention to these holes here through which these bolts go, and they attach to this thing. This is for the knobs. One of these goes into each hole, and you can see what it does. It presses on the dovetail. This plate aligns with, there's 4 little pins in there, and that squeezes it and puts it in place. Also, there's a spring along with an Art Deco knob that I filled with sand and epoxy just because it was a rusty, dirty mess. That gives it some mass and will keep it from rusting again. That presses on that and tightens it all up. Before everything goes in place for good, I'm going to apply some combination of finishing wax, anti-seize, and or grease to all of the mating surfaces. There's probably an easy way to do this, and I'll have figured that out after I do it the hard way. Spin this up, and we have to get it to those holes. There we go. And already the crank is working, but you can see there's a lot of slop in it, and that's what this is for. You can make out a faint scratch on it where this thing probably hit it, and this is the way it goes. This will just be a dry run for now. I'll grease it up before I put it in for keeps. Now we just make these snug, not tight, and it should take all of that play away. Like magic. Smooth as silk. Beautiful. Now for side 2, note how the mounting bracket finds the way it goes because of gravity. Just feed it in this way. Not bad. That went nice and smooth. And not because of editing either. It really did go smoothly. But I'm not done yet. Don't wait too long to buy one of these. You know you need one. Personally, I waited way too long. Unfortunately, you can't buy every tool you will ever need all at once. We have to prioritize. If you're wondering which way it goes like this, so that the point's at the bottom. But if you want to check, to be sure, it will kind of snap onto these screw heads, and then just align it by sighting this way, and you can easily tell. Not tight. We just want to find that little nest that it belongs in. And fortunately, it's easy to tell if you have it working correctly. Nice and smooth. An installation pro tip, even though this is the first time I've ever done this. Remove this set screw on the bottom and you'll be able to see in there. And now I pick up the bottom of the infeed table, take weight off, and now keep your eye right here. And when these two align, when the hole aligns with the divot right there, that's when the set screw is in place. You want the set screw to kind of sink in below flush. If it doesn't, then you probably don't have things aligned correctly. Like that. And because I'm so liberal with the grease, I lost a lot of friction. So I added a washer here to keep the spring from being scratchy when it tightens. You're right, I used too much grease, and the grease reduced the friction and is kind of problematic. It's a balancing act. Also, I got grease everywhere. But now is the time that you want to make sure that both of these top surfaces are in the same plane. If they're perfect, good for you. Mine is almost perfect, with the outfeed table falling away about not quite the thickness of a piece of paper. That's a tolerance that I can tolerate. Perfect. Remember that easier way I told you we'd learn? Here it is. Bolts in first. Snap these into their sweet spot using blobs of wax, not grease. A big magnet holds it from falling out of place. Now we feed the little table that is the outfeed table in from the top. Magnet down here, out of the way. Loosen the top 3 set screws so that it can drop into place, but keep this one proud a little bit just so that it keeps that thing in place. Remove the magnet as it comes down. There it is. Now we tighten up the set screws. And tighten this up so it doesn't move. Now the horrible part of the easy part is fishing these up in so that we can mount it again. For this part, you need to be able to think around corners, but get started with something like this. Put a nut inside of it so the bolt doesn't go the whole way down. And I'm feeling for this. And that's how I attach it to the mounting bracket. Now just imagine me doing it in here, off camera, and I'm not swearing or anything. And yes, you can stop typing. I know that you can just stick the bolt up this way and put the nut and washer here. But I don't want to, because for one, the washer doesn't fit there, and for two, if it gets loose, the bolt will fall off entirely. And if that happens while the jointer is running 30 years from now, it'll be a problem. And another pro tip from someone who's doing this for the first time. Look way up in there. While you're trying to thread those bolts in, you're going to be wondering if your bracket is too far up or down. Well, thankfully from this point of view you can see it, and you can adjust the bracket by moving the crank. It really wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. And you will definitely need an extension in order to tighten it up. Now same thing on this side. We'll have the magnet ready. Lose the grease because finishing wax turns hard. So later it will provide us with the friction that we want, even though we want to preserve the smoothness. This table has been lowered as much as I can lower it to help get it out of the way. That's great, and the cutter head can go in now, except for the fact that those cutter head bolts have to come up through the bottom, so I have a new problem. Need something to hold it in place up here. I would use a nut if I had one, but it's fine thread. So magnets will work fine. Oh, finally, let that be the end of it. They're all in. With any luck, that's it for the dumb mistakes today. Let's put the belt right here in the way so I don't forget. Cutter head can go in, but it can't be attached yet until it's around both pulleys. Now it can be bolted in place. Got it. Next time, if I have any trouble servicing the machine, next time I'll just put nuts at the top here. That will make it easier to disassemble, I think. Additional belt tension can be had by adjusting the motor down here. If you look, the holes are elongated, and that way it lets me move the motor this way if I want. Underneath, under here, I used a piece of 1/4-inch steel to make a sort of mounting plate. The holes on this are not elongated, so it moves along with the motor back and forth in order to tension the belt. It would be nice to make a shroud that covers over this belt, but I really wanted to accommodate dust collection with a bucket here, and so the motor has been kicked to that side just a little bit, not so much so that it interferes with this handle on the left. Everything is a compromise. If you can't have perfect in everything, it's nice to have good enough in multiple places. You can't beat new bearings. Honestly, it makes it function like a new machine. Another point to note is I had to use a shim to take up some slop. I just used a soda pop can. Was I able to get it perfectly true? No. Although I did get it rather close. The lower pulley could use a bit of work too, but there aren't enough hours in the day. It might be easier to just get new ones. But I did make sure that both pulleys are in the same plane and lined up from crisscross error. If you want the 10-second version, put a level on it this way, and then you can use plumb to make sure that both pulleys line up this way. As for making sure both pulleys are parallel, well, use your eyes. It's incredible what we can discern with our eyes. You can see that I could still move the motor a little bit this way, just to get it perfect. For this part, I'm going to end it here because there's still a good bit to get through, and this part has gone on long enough. In the next video, we'll go over fence install because there's a beautiful mechanism here that's all in pieces. It all has to go back together. And also blade sharpening. The picky among you will call them knives. I'll show you a down and dirty way to sharpen those, and hopefully I'll figure out a way to install them correctly in the next episode. Thanks for joining me. See you later. But before you go, 2 things. Thing 1, I've been making how-to videos for well over a decade now. but that doesn't mean that I still can't streamline these better, make them better so that you can take more of the important stuff from my experience. So please leave me constructive feedback. I listen to it. I really do consider all of it, as long as it's nicely phrased. Thing 2, if you're considering going about redoing a jointer like this, a model like this Delta is readily available on the secondhand market. You can find them everywhere, and a lot of them are very similar to this. I highly recommend one of these, but there's a caveat. Make sure it comes with a good stand. The bulk of this project really, in terms of my lost hours, most of my time flushed down the toilet tinkering went into the stand itself, and not so much the jointer. So be aware that on the surface, it looks like you're doing a lot of rust removal, but that's not the bulk of your time. Your time goes away in tinkering with a poor foundation. This stand, I think, was made by some students in the industrial arts program years and years and years ago by some hope-to-be welders. Chances are some of those terrible young welders did grow up to have successful careers in welding, but that was not the case when this was made, and so I was left with a lot of problems to try to work out in order to get this to function right. Look for something really well made, solid, and ideally factory made. Okay, on to the next part.